call the February 20th meeting of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement to order. Quorum is present. The first item of the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from February 13th, 2023. Is there a motion to move those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Senator Frantz moves approval of the February 13th, 2023 meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the minutes from February 13th are adopted. Our next item of business is to consider House File 782 or Senate File 413 from Representative Becker-Finn and Senator Pappas. Before we hear from our bill authors and testifiers, I will let our nonpartisan staff explain the bill. Executive Director Susan Lincheski, please explain House File 782.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bill is HF 782 SF 413. There is a DE1, which of course replaces the bill and does make some changes to the bill. I will do a very quick section by section of the DE1. Section 1 introduces the new chapter 187, which will be known as the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program. Section 2 provides statistics that demonstrate the need for the program. Section 3 is the definitions section. There are two important definitions here. One is covered employee. That is any employee of a covered employer who is at least 18 years old. A covered employer is defined as any employer, including nonprofits, that has at least one employee, has been engaged in business in the state of Minnesota for at least 1 year, and does not sponsor a retirement plan for its employees. And that's the important part. The covered employer does not currently sponsor a retirement plan for its employees. Section 4 provides the main features of the program. The program must open by October 1, 2024. By that time, the board must have established procedures for opening Roth IRAs and traditional IRA accounts for covered employees who do not opt out of the program. The board must also have determined an initial contribution rate and put together an auto escalation schedule that will provide for increases year after year in the contribution rate. The program may open in phases over a 2-year period. Employees must be permitted to elect a different contribution rate or to elect out of the program altogether. Individuals who are not employees, such as sole proprietors and independent contractors, are also allowed to participate in the program, and that's a voluntary participation. Section 5 addresses how program funds are to be held and invested. A trust will hold the employee contributions. An administrative fund will hold all other program funds and be used for the payment of administrative expenses. The State Board of Investment will oversee the investment funds. Employees will be permitted to direct the investment of their accounts in the investment funds. Assets in the IRA accounts may not be accessed by the state or by anybody else. Section 6 defines the responsibilities of covered employers. They must deduct contributions from paychecks and transmit the funds to the program or face penalties to be established by the board. They must provide information about the program to employees. They have no other obligations and no fiduciary duty regarding the program. The Attorney General must enforce the penalties. Section 7 defines the Board of Directors. There will be a 7-member Board of Directors. They will serve 2-year terms. Appointments must be made by January 15, 2024. The first meeting of the board must be held by March 1st, 2024. They have many duties listed in the bill, including appointing an executive director, limiting expenses charged to the accounts, preparing annual financial and statistical reports, and if they choose to do so, entering into a partnership agreement with another state with their program. Section 8 imposes fiduciary duties on the board members. Section 9 protects the state from liability. Section 10 requires state agencies to provide assistance and information. Section 12 requires the commission executive director to provide support to the board until the program executive director is appointed. Section 13 is an appropriation for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. The amounts are not yet determined. That's my overview. Thank you.
Thank you for that thorough explanation, Ms. Lincheski. Senator Pappas, would you like to offer an introduction to the bill and move the DE1 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the DE1 Authors Amendment, which puts the bill into the form that Representative Becker-Finn, who cannot make it this morning, and I would like.
Any discussions to the DE1 amendment? Any discussions? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting the DE1 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. The motion prevails and the DE1 amendment is adopted. Back to the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here today to present Secure Choice, a proposal for a defined contribution pension plan, an IRA for low-wage workers and for those workers whose employers are not offering any kind of a pension program. But first, I want to tell you about my Aunt Rose. Aunt Rose's husband, my Uncle Roy, passed away shortly after his retirement. My aunt then, over the next 20 years, lived on his pension that she received as a surviving spouse, their savings, and the sale of their family home. But eventually, she ran out of money and then had left only a small amount of Social Security since she personally did not have many quarters of work outside her home. She was trying to live on $1,200 per month, which was her Social Security. Her rent in a senior building in Hopkins, Minnesota was $900, leaving her $300 a month for all her non-rent expenses. A defined contribution plan during her early work years with compounded interest would have provided her with her food budget. Serving on the Pension Commission for many years, I realized that those of us with pension plans are extremely fortunate. All Minnesota workers should have an opportunity to easily save, and those savings safely invested by the State Board of Investment. Madam Chair and members, we have some wonderful testifiers today, so I don't need to give you a high-level picture of the bill, or maybe I'll just mention a few things since Ms. Lincheski went over it. Just a reminder that this establishes and governs a new savings program called the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program. Employers that do not sponsor a retirement plan for their employees are required to transmit a percentage of each employee's pay to a state-sponsored individual retirement account. Employees will have the option to change the contribution percentage or opt out of participation altogether. And in some of the states that already have this plan, we usually find that 60% of the workers will stay in the plan and about 30% will opt out. So that's 60% who are saving for retirement. There is no cost to employers except for incidental costs incurred to modify their payroll systems to deduct contributions on either a pre-tax or an after-tax basis, and then send them to the SBI for deposit into employee accounts. As Ms. Lincheski mentioned, there'll be a governing structure of a board of directors, an executive director, and staff, and record keeping and administration can be handled by an outside administrator. These are the major provisions. Unfortunately, Representative Baker-Finn, as I mentioned, is not able to join us. She has her own personal story, which I'm sure we'll hear at some point. But Madam Chair, if we could then now invite the testifiers.
And thank you, Senator Pappas. And before we do that, I do see that we have an amendment, and that's Senator Rasmussen. That's your amendment, I understand?
Yes, Madam Chair, can I either discuss the amendment now or after testifiers, whatever you prefer?
Why don't we go ahead and move with the testifier first, and then we can discuss the amendment. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and have our first testifier. I hear Jim Scheibel, State President, American Association of Retired Persons.
And the former mayor of St. Paul.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jim Scheibel. I am the volunteer president for AARP Minnesota. On behalf of AARP Minnesota's nearly 620,000 members, we want to thank you for the opportunity to present on the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program. AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to helping people ages 50 and older improve the quality of their life as they age. In doing so, we focus not only those nearing and currently in retirement, but also those at all stages of their careers that will retire in the future. Minnesota is facing a retirement crisis. Declines in employer-sponsored pensions and lack of savings impact people's ability to achieve a secure retirement. Nearly half of the Americans nearing retirement age 65 have less than $25,000 put away, where 1 in 4 have less than $1,000 in savings. At this rate, an unacceptable number of middle-class retirees will be unable to afford their basic needs in retirement, things like medicine, utilities, and rent. Despite its critical importance, Minnesota average Social Security benefit is just $1,600 a month, with 42% of the retirees relying on Social Security for at least half their income. Social Security was never intended to be a person's sole source of income in retirement. It was intended to be one leg of three-legged approach, with employee-sponsored retirement plans and individual savings envisioned as the other critical components. In Minnesota, 32% of private sector employees, approximately 700,000 workers for an employer, does not have a retirement plan. Employees of color are more significantly less likely to have access to workplace retirement plans. Small business owners want retirement savings options, and employees want to save. The problem is lack of access. Costs can be prohibitive for small businesses to offer their own plans. So by pooling resources, we can create economies to scale and offer lower cost products. Minnesota can get ahead of the crisis. Employees are 20 times more likely to save merely by having access to a workplace retirement plan. Secure Choice allows workers to set aside wages through an easily accessible auto IRA program. The benefits of increased retirement savings go beyond individual savers and their families. Offering Minnesota workers an effortless way to save for retirement will ultimately save taxpayers' dollars, as fewer households will need to rely on social services. Minnesota could save as much as $258 million on public assistance program over the next 10 years, simply by helping people save for their own retirement. We urge you to join other states by taking this bipartisan action to address the retirement crisis. We are pleased to be joined today by experts from Oregon Saves and the Pew Research. Rebuilding the promise of financial security in retirement must include modern, expanded options. AARP believes that we all have a right to live with self-reliance and dignity in the future. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mayor Scheibel. Our next two testifiers are on via Zoom, and the first will be Tobias Reed, and up after that will be John Scott. And I would just like to remind our testifiers that we do have a lot of people testifying today, so if we could limit our testimony to 3 minutes, I would greatly appreciate that. Is Tobias Reed available?
I am, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commission members. I'm Tobias Reed. I have the honor of serving as State Treasurer in Oregon, and I'm excited to be with you this morning to share the story of Oregon Saves, which is the first state-based retirement savings program in the U.S. We launched it in 2017. I think anyone who has the privilege of working in public life has a list of the things they are most proud of working on. While I certainly hope to add to that list, I don't see any way that Oregon Saves is ever going to come off of that list. Before we enacted this program, Oregon had a very similar situation to what I heard described in Minnesota. Nearly 1 million workers, more than half of our 1.8 million workforce, who didn't have access to a retirement savings option at work. And we saw the same research that you just heard about the dramatic increase in the likelihood that someone participates in a savings program when they have that option at work. So in 2015, when I was a member of the Oregon House, I sponsored the legislation that ultimately created Oregon Saves. And as the elected state treasurer, I've had the privilege of helping to implement that program since. Before we launched, we were really thorough and thoughtful about how we wanted to design our program. We had a task force that looked at different models and found that the opt-out IRA model had the most potential to make a big impact on the lack of retirement savings in Oregon. We also had strong partners whose expertise was vital, and AARP is certainly at the top of that list in Oregon, as I suspect it will be for you too. And we worked with other states who have since implemented programs that are similar to ours. We also had great support from the Oregon legislature, a $5 million loan from the legislature that helped us to get started. So in 2017, we started a pilot program on a number of phases to make sure that it was user-friendly for both employers and for savers. It was a volunteer pool, so we knew that it was more likely we'd get feedback on the experience, either good or bad. In the end, I'm happy to say that we had a lot of positive feedback and turned into a number of advocates for the program, as well as giving us really important opportunities to work through hiccups as we got started. Our program is very simple, very similar to what was described this morning for your proposal. If an employer in Oregon does not offer their own retirement savings program, they are required to participate in Oregon Saves and facilitate the participation of their employees. Any employee can opt out if they want, but we're finding that the vast majority of people stay at about 70% in our case. They can adjust whatever they want to withhold and contribute to their Roth IRA, but the standard is 5%, which escalates 1% each year up to a maximum of 10%. All of this, as you probably know, is influenced by the research of Richard Thaler, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017, who found that people really want to save. They just need that little nudge. And in Oregon, the nudge has worked. We're around 115,000 funded accounts now who have saved more than $183 million. Most of them, and this is especially important, people who have never saved before. We became, as a program, self-sustaining sooner than initially planned, meaning that the state of Oregon and the people of Oregon are benefiting from an important program at less cost than initially projected and with no need for additional loans or general fund support. And I think you already know this too, the success of Oregon Saves is going to have long-term implications for the state as a whole. We're going to have fewer people facing that terrible choice of entering retirement in poverty or not retiring at all. And as someone already said today, that means they need less assistance from taxpayers and have more choices in front of them. It is easy, one last point here, and I'll conclude. I think it's easy to get lost in numbers and abstract concepts when thinking about a program like this. But I feel, whenever I feel myself kind of heading down that road, I try to remember individual people. We heard about some people already, but for me, the guy that typifies the experience works at a ski area in Southern Oregon, and I think of a video that I saw him make. Bud works in that ski lodge and describes really eloquently as he starts how he didn't know anything about retirement, how to get started, what to do, and he describes Oregon Saves, and his face lights up. And he says, now I can look at the statements, I see them adding up, and I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I think that is the thing to keep in mind as you consider this program. Remember the impact that you're going to have on individual people. We've got big plans in Oregon. This is the beginning still for us. We want to continue to build on the foundation that we've established. And most importantly, all of us as Americans are in this together. So we want to be as much a partner with you as you want. We are happy to share our lessons and collaborate with you. So if we can ever be helpful, I'm just a Zoom click away and eager to be helpful to all of you. I appreciate the chance to be with you. I'm happy to answer any questions now or later. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. And if you could stay on in case our members have questions later about implementation, that would be greatly appreciated. Next is John Scott, retirement.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Next is John Scott via Zoom as well, the Retirement Savings Project Director, the Pew Charitable Trust. And up after that is Hannah Zinn.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Scott. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chair Herr, Vice Chair Frentz, and other members of the Commission for the opportunity to testify on HF 782 and SF 413, the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program Act. My name is John Scott, and I'm the Project Director for Retirement Savings at the Pew Charitable Trust. Pew is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to informing the public and improving public policy. Pew supports the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program Act for the over 700,000 private sector Minnesota workers who currently lack access to a workplace retirement plan. We know such programs work, as the Treasurer eloquently testified. As of today, 12 states have enacted similar savings programs, and in those states where programs are already operating, over 630,000 savers have accumulated almost $650 million in assets. These programs also work for employers. Our 2020 survey of participating employers in Oregon Saves found that 3 in 4 said they were either satisfied or neutral about the program. These programs allow small businesses in particular to compete with larger businesses to recruit and retain workers. Our research also shows that these programs work for the employees. Pew recently conducted a survey of workers participating in the Illinois program, and almost 2/3 were satisfied with their program experience. But perhaps more importantly, 38% said that the program itself made them feel more financially secure versus only 14% who felt the program made them feel less financially secure. Significantly, the proposed program will also help taxpayers. Insufficient retirement savings, as has been noted, will increase pressure on public assistance programs serving older adults and reduce tax revenue, shifting a growing fiscal burden to a shrinking population of working-age taxpayers. A Pew Commission study preliminarily estimates that insufficient retirement savings combined with a growing older adult population will cost Minnesota a cumulative $5 billion in additional social assistance spending over 20 years. Finally, it's important to understand how a secure choice program will interact with the private market for retirement plans. A state program should not compete with private retirement plan service providers. Pew examined federal data on employer-sponsored retirement plans to compare new plan adoption rates in states with secure choice programs relative to states without such programs. Pew's analysis found not only that employers are still adopting their own retirement plans in secure choice states, but also that there is a higher rate of increase in new plans being adopted by employers following the adoption of a statewide secure choice program. Rather than competing with the private market for retirement products, state programs actually complement the private market. In conclusion, a secure choice program is necessary and timely for Minnesota. Thank you again for this opportunity to provide our views. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, and we will be taking questions afterwards, so if you could stay on. Up next, we have Hannah Zind with Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. Please identify yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Hannah Zinn, and I'm the Public Policy Manager for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. I'm here to testify in support of establishing the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program. Social Security alone does not provide enough financial stability for retirees. According to the National Institute on Retirement Security, the typical working-age household has only $2,500 in retirement assets, and near-retirement households have just $14,500 in savings. The nation faces a vast retirement savings deficit, estimated to be as much as $6.8 trillion, or about $57,000 per household. Nearly half of American workers do not have an employer-sponsored retirement plan. In Minnesota, 32% of workers lack access to retirement savings options on the job, with workers of color being least likely to be covered by an employer-sponsored plan. Secure choice accounts would make it easier for workers to grow additional savings needed for a secure and independent future. Giving employees the option to enroll and take their accounts with them when they switch jobs creates greater job flexibility and freedom, removing the fear of losing out on already accrued earnings. Secure choice accounts will give employees a simple way to plan and prepare for retirement, meaning fewer will rely on government safety nets in the future, saving taxpayer dollars. Employers can provide better employment benefits to attract and retain talent in the competitive workplace by creating a deduction from a regular paycheck with no ongoing costs or risk to the employer. Small businesses, such as restaurants, retailers, and construction companies, are always looking for better benefits they can use to obtain talent. Secure Choice accounts would allow these small businesses the opportunity to provide benefits they would otherwise not be able to afford. The Minneapolis Regional Chamber recognizes the opportunities these bills would provide to small and large businesses and workers in the region and the state as a whole. We hope you recognize the significant benefits Secure Choice accounts would have on employers and employees. Thank you for acting on this important issue, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Zinn. Our next three testifiers will be via Zoom again. The first will be Eric Forsberg. After that will be Karen Swenson, and then Necarius Herita Rosario. And if I said that incorrectly, please correct me when you get online. So if Eric Forsberg is ready, please introduce yourself. He is not. All right, apparently he is not in the Zoom, so we will move him till later. Next up is Karen Swenson. You're on mute, Ms. Swenson.
Hi, my name is Karen Swenson. I'm the director of Meadow Park Preschool and Child Care Center in Rochester, Minnesota. I've been in my current role for 30 years, and I've been in early childhood far longer than that. So I'm excited today to testify in favor of these bills and the establishment of the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program. Running a child care business is really difficult. While I'm passionate about the kids we teach, the families we serve, and the teachers I hire, the margins are so thin and the public investment is so low that we are in a prolonged and deeply troubling staffing crisis. Offering quality care is expensive, and families with young children can only afford to pay so much. This is why it's difficult for me to offer competitive wages and benefits to employees. Unfortunately, right now, I can only offer an average wage of $15 an hour and no benefits except for paid time off. This is especially tough because childcare teachers are really the workforce behind the workforce. For years, I've wanted to offer my employees more benefits, especially some type of retirement package. Nearing retirement age myself, I know how important it is to start saving early in one's career, that those years of savings and compounding interest can really add up. But they can fly by fast if no one is planning. For my young teachers, I often encourage them to try to save for the future, but there has never been an affordable way to put money away for the future. Secure Choice would be a great new tool that my staff could use to start their retirement planning now. This program is a starting point, and I would love to see it eventually evolve to offer more options, including provider match. Ideally, we will one day have a child care system that will allow independent child care centers just like mine the ability to participate in such a match as we work towards a system in early childhood where we are treated more like our peers in the K-12 system. Thank you for letting me testify today, and I urge you to pass this important tool to help our child care workforce. Maybe this system was a little too late for my generation, but hopefully it can help the next generation of workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swenson. Next is Necarius Herita Rosario. If you're ready, please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Can you guys hear me well?
It's a little bit muffled, but so if you could just maybe speak closer to your microphone, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. My name is Nicauris Heredia Rosario. I am the Legislative and Policy Director in Economic Development for the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. And I am here today on behalf of the council to express our support for Senate File 413. As a state agency, the council advises elected officials on matters affecting the Latino community. And we have found that preparing for retirement is particularly difficult for Latino Minnesotans. Despite having one of the state's highest labor force participation rates, they are at a high risk of not having retirement savings, with 46% of Latino workers lacking access to an employer-provided retirement plan. During our engagement with the community last year, we heard many stories from people who have worked for years but have not been able to save for retirement. I would like to share with you one of such story. This is the story of Isabel. She moved to Minnesota in 2005. She has been employed at a small family-owned restaurant for more than 18 years, starting as a dishwasher and cook assistant, and eventually working her way up to become the main cook. Despite having worked for 18 years, Isabel doesn't have a retirement savings plan because her employer does not offer one, and she is worried about her financial security in the future. Isabel's story is just one example of the challenges that many Latino workers face in saving for retirement. Without payroll deduction plans, it can be hard for them to save enough money to support themselves when they retire. And many in our communities also support family members back in their home countries, which is also another difficulty. We also heard during our listening session from young people about their parents' struggles. Many of them told us that their parents don't know what a 401k or an IRA is or how it works. And they never had the opportunity to learn about it because their employer does not offer these programs. You know, we can all agree that we all want financial security in our later years, but people of color face significant barriers to accessing retirement savings, leading to increased inequality and financial insecurity in retirement. So making retirement security available for all starts with making it easier for workers to save, and this bill will do just that. So the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs strongly supports the adoption of Senate File 413 and encourages this commission to support this important issue. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Gerardo Rosario. Next, we have Beth Cadone, Vice President, Tax and Fiscal Policy, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Beth Cadone with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. We represent 6,300 businesses across the state of Minnesota in all industries and all sizes. We certainly agree with the worthy goal of trying to encourage greater savings. However, we are opposed to the bill in its current form. It creates a new employer mandate with too many unknowns related to costs, penalties, and the timelines for employers. It also does not have a small business exemption, as has been enacted in most of the other states that have a similar program. Minnesota already imposes a higher cost burden than most other states, and this bill adds a new employer requirement that is not required in most states, including any of our neighboring states. We would urge legislators, as you look at this proposal, to also consider the cumulative impact of all the new employer mandates moving through the legislature this year, such as the new paid sick and safe time, the new 24-week paid medical and family leave, that would impact all employers, greatly changing current employer benefits with this new $1 billion plus annual payroll tax. This bill, along with the other new employer mandates, would add a new requirement for private sector employers, and once again, the hardest hit would be those smaller businesses that do not have sophisticated HR departments to help navigate these new requirements and provide that input for their employees. And if they make a mistake, they will be subject to penalties. We would ask the committee to consider the small business exemption that is provided in the amendment A1. What we've seen in the other states that have enacted this proposal is most of those have enacted a small business exemption. And the reason is that smallest firms really are at the greatest risk. According to the Census Bureau, 14% of businesses with 1 to 4 employees do not survive over a 2-year period. That's more than double the rate of larger entities. Another option, of course, would be to look at a voluntary approach such as versus a mandate, such was adopted by Massachusetts and Washington State. We are also concerned over the penalty being set by a non-elected board. We do think that's something that should be really looked at and done legislatively. And any penalties really should be minimal, as has been provided in those other states. We think the date of October 24th, 2024 seems unrealistic, both for the ability of the state to get this up and running, as well as to the impact on businesses, especially if you're looking to put new legislation, as I mentioned, with those other programs on employer mandates. And I think the bill as amended with the A1 amendment also addressed those timelines, so we would encourage the adoption of the amendment for that reason as well. And the other concern is the unknown costs. I believe that it has a blank in the general fund, so kind of the unknown cost to the state's budget to get this up and running. And also any competition with the private market sector place is also a concern. We're happy to work with the bill authors on how to encourage greater savings without putting any undue burden on our private sector employers, so I encourage the adoption of the A1 amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kadoun. Next, for our last testifier who signed up ahead of time is Robin Rowan, Executive Director of Minnesota Insurance and Financial Services Council. Please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Madam Chair, Commission members, my name is Robin Rowan. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Insurance and Financial Services Council, or MIFSC. MIFSC members promote financial security of Minnesotans through the sale of products such as life insurance, annuities, PFML products, and long-term care insurance. MIFSC members also offer retirement solutions, which is why I'm here today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I also want to thank Senator Pappas for her relentless pursuit of solutions to address the savings crisis. We agree that expanding retirement security is a critical mission. Senator Pappas and I have been debating the merits of a state-run IRA program for almost a decade, and I would like the record to reflect that I don't think either of us have aged a day. And while MIFSC members strongly prefer private market solutions and a carrot as opposed to a stick approach to encourage and enable people to save, we do recognize that these state-run programs result in more people saving, especially beginner savers, and they can exist with the private market. It is important to note, however, that these programs are not without limitations. State-run programs can be expensive and complicated to implement. Since 2012, when California enacted the first state-run program, Oregon was the first to get theirs up and running, but California was the first to pass theirs. Only 12 states have enacted auto-enroll programs, and of those programs, only 6 are up and running. Employer participation has lagged far below projections, even in states with the statutory mandate. Employee opt-out rates are also high, exceeding 30% in most states, and many workers using the state Roth IRA are using the state Roth IRA plans for emergency savings instead of long-term retirement security. The withdrawal rate in California was around 17%, and in Illinois and Oregon, the rates are between 25 and 30%. State-run programs don't allow employer matching, and enrolled employees have no access to financial advice to help them develop a long-range plans that will meet their individual needs. There have also been some new developments in the private market that I would like to share. The federal government continues to make it easier for employers to offer private sector retirement plans. Starting this year, employers with less than 50 employees are now eligible for a tax credit of 100% of qualified retirement plan administrative costs. And it's even easier now for small employers to join pooled employer plans that allow small employers from unrelated industries to join a 401k with all of the administrative and fiduciary duties handled by the provider. These starter plans are available for a $500 startup fee and $1,200 a year to maintain them. For individual savers, the federal government is replacing the existing savers tax credit with up to $2,000 in matching funds deposited directly into an IRA for the income eligible. One of the things, as the testifier from the chamber mentioned, we prefer a voluntary plan. We prefer, even with a mandatory plan, we would like to see some kind of marketplace to help employers that may not want to use the state plan to make it easier to hook them up with private plans and private financial advisors that can help them set up a plan that fits their individual needs. Encouraging people to save for retirement is critical for all the reasons that you've heard, and we should consider all options to get people there. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rowan. Are there any testifiers who are here in the audience who would like to provide testimony? All right, it does not look like there is any. I would just like to note that there were two pieces of submitted testimony for the National Federation of Independent Business and also Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. I think that at this time, I would like to actually have Senator Rasmussen for you to move your amendment. We can discuss your amendment and also the bill that is before us as it has been amended. So if you, Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, I just want to make a brief comment before we hear Senator Rasmussen's amendment. Yeah, I think this is a very, it's still a work in process. And we have several other committees we'll be going to, and I'm eager to explore some of these ideas about how this bill would, how secure choice would intersect with federal law, how we can also assist the private sector in being more accessible and available to savers. And I do think that they brought up some good points about penalties and costs, and I'm sorry I can't do anything about the cumulative impact, but I think this has, of all these other bills that were mentioned, this probably has the least cumulative impact, the least impact on employers because the cost is so minimal to join when you do a deduction for workers' comp or for unemployment comp or just your regular payroll. It's simply another line where that deduction is going to the SBI, so it's fairly minimal. Ms. Rowan is right. This plan, an IRA, does not allow employer contributions. So if you have an employer who wants to contribute, doing a more traditional 401k would be an option for them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the 1A amendment, and I'm happy to discuss it.
Senator Rasmussen moves the 1A amendment, and please explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate Senator Pappas bringing this bill before the commission today, and I think it has an admirable goal of helping Minnesotans save more. We do have a savings crisis in our state and across the country where people are simply not saving enough of their earnings to be able to pay for their bills during retirement. The 1A amendment addresses some of the concerns that have been brought up by employers. The first part of the amendment would allow for employers that have 25 or fewer employees, we would copy Virginia's auto IRA model, where it allows those employees to the opportunity to opt in, but it does not require the employers to set up this program and to go through the administrative legwork to get it set up. The thinking there is simply a lot of these smaller businesses may not have formalized HR or finance functions, and so this would be trying to alleviate the impact on small business from this additional employer mandate. And then secondly, I'm also a little concerned around the timeline of the bill before the commission that would go into effect on October 2024. That's a very quick timeline, and so in the amendment, we proposed a phased approach that for employers with 150 or more employees, it would take place on January 1 of 2025, and then about a year and a half later for those with fewer than 150 employees. And the thinking behind this is that it would give the board more time to get this set up, get the kinks worked out. In addition, with other potential employer mandates that are being considered this session, would make sure that they all don't hit at the same time and overburden businesses with the cumulative effect. So I think these are some, fairly reasonable guardrails that other states have followed, and would appreciate members' support.
Any discussion to the 1A amendment? Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to work with Senator Rasmussen and some of the other stakeholders on some of these suggestions. I think they're good, but I'm not kind of ready to accept the amendment at this point. And I also would like to talk more with Treasurer Reed about how they phased in. I think it does make sense to pilot it and who we should pilot it with. I hate to make those small businesses and those small business employees wait so much longer before they can start saving. That's one concern I have. On the other hand, I want to make sure that we do this right.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Any further discussion on the 1A amendment? Representative O'Driscoll.
No, I'll pass on the bill as amended if the amendment goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate Senator Pappas's openness to thinking about how some of these changes could be made in future committee stops. One question I had for the bill author is, another idea that's been brought up is right now in the current legislation, the board will be setting up any penalties and also approving any administrative fees that would be applied to these plans without any legislative oversight. And I think especially this commission could be a good venue for having that penalty schedule and those fee schedules reviewed and approved. And so, Madam Chair, my question for the bill author is that an idea that you would consider adopting at a future committee stop?
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Rasmussen. Yes, I think that would be an option that we could consider. That you're right, that we should have some more oversight over, especially something like setting penalties. And usually the Judiciary Committee also likes to have oversight over that. So we may be able to resolve that by looking at what other states have used. Certainly, we don't want it to be onerous because we do want businesses to willingly feel like this is a benefit they can provide at no cost to them for their employees.
Any further discussion? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Pappas, we have discussed this bill many times, and it is so true, and I appreciate the great focus on the power of investment over time, cumulative investment over time. And that's what's so important as Minnesotans go to plan their retirements. And so there's a lot to like about this bill because of the focus on that importance. But I am concerned that in wanting to help, we appear to be short-circuiting Minnesotans' ability to work with the financial advisors that can give them that holistic approach. We know retirement and retirement income is very complex, and it's not the same for anyone in the room, or it's very, very individualized about a holistic approach about how to best prepare, plan, and distribute that retirement income. And I just think there might be an unintended consequence because any Minnesotan can purchase an IRA, whether it be a Roth or traditional, but by making this mandatory, and yet there may be we might be short-circuiting the very personal financial advice that Minnesotans would need. And I understand some financial planners or advisors are able to offer or choose to offer IRAs, whether they be traditional or Roth, on a pro bono basis. So there isn't that advising cost. Others have some cost associated to that. So that's my concern, that we are short-circuiting some of the very personal financial advice and planning that Minnesotans would need. And then a question for Senator Pappas. I'm curious about the savings. What savings would there be from this bill? In other words, I think you mentioned a $5 million upfront, or maybe that was in a different state to get. I think that was the Oregon model, but we don't have a fiscal note yet, and so I think that will be important. And then as we get that, it will be important to try and understand: is there really a savings for Minnesota employers or employees, for the employees, or are we going to perhaps inadvertently lessen the likelihood that they'll get personal financial advice?
Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, I'll try to be short since I know time is short. Currently, a employee, a worker who wants to go ahead and set up, as you mentioned, their own IRA can do that and contract with a financial advisor. They're just not doing it. they're not doing it to the extent that they need to. So they could still continue under this law, you can opt out of being part of the system. It's just an automatic opt-in. And we know that when people automatically are in something, if they have a busy life, if they're working 2 jobs, if they're trying to raise their kids, if they're struggling, they probably don't even pay any attention to that, and suddenly they have a savings account for their pension. So I think that option is still available to people who are more interested in exploring that. But for people who just have busy lives, this is just an option for them. The State Board of Investment has an incredible record, as we know, of returns, and so is a very good value for their money. And yes, we still are pursuing what the fiscal note would be, and I think we could talk to also to Treasurer Reed more about. There's the cost of setting up the board, and then sometimes there's been a loan to kind of start the investment out sooner so that you have more clout in terms of investing. And that's an option that we could consider depending on resources that are available.
And actually, Senator Nelson, we're going to move on because we're still in the amendment. We haven't even gotten to the underlying bill yet, so thank you. If you could maybe save it for the, and then I'm going to give you the last word, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the conversation on this amendment, and I do really think we have an opportunity to make this a bipartisan bill if we're able to address some of the concerns that stakeholders have brought to us. I look forward to continuing to work with the bill authors on trying to improve this bill and make sure we're not creating another onerous employer mandate. But at this time, I'll withdraw the 1A amendment.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And I trust that Senator Pappas, who I've worked with many times on bills, will work with you on these amendments and potentially offering something its further steps. So thank you so much, Senator Rasmussen. And what we will do now is go ahead and move to the underlying bill. We only have a few minutes because we allotted 45 minutes today for this bill. We're at an hour now. So I want to make sure, please raise your hand if you have any comments, and if you could be brief on your comments. I do just want to actually, though, back to Senator Rasmussen's original amendment, though, and the questions to Treasurer Reed, if maybe he could now talk to the bill as to the cost and that were brought up, and if he is still on, if he could provide some insights into that, that would be appreciated. And then I have Representative O'Driscoll and Senator Howe on the list to speak.
Madam Chair, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're interested in how we handle the startup costs, and feel free to redirect me if I'm off track. The legislature in Oregon loaned us $5 million for startup costs. We have that obligation to repay those dollars to the general fund, but it allowed us to do the work, the legal work, the design work, and the startup phases, and has put us on a good path. I think a lot of in a lot of ways, the discussion I'm listening to is for me a return to the past, a trip back in time, because a lot of the same issues that you all are raising are issues that we dealt with as we started, and I think it's appropriate. They're thoughtful questions. I can just tell you that we are really glad in Oregon that we got started when we did. We've been able to address, I think, satisfactorily to most people, the concerns that you're articulating. We're happy to share the way that we did that, but our program enjoys strong support amongst employers, employees, and I think we're all really proud of it. In fact, I'm trying to remember the name of the polling firm that did this a couple of years after we started, and found that we had enjoyed 82% public support across the board. So there's, I think, a number of thoughtful ways to address the balance and the questions that your members are articulating. We're happy to share more details as you'd like.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. And Senator Pappas, did that answer the question you asked to direct to Treasurer Reed to respond to?
I think we had a question about phase-in, but we can talk
Sure.
could talk with him about that offline.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. And we have Representative O'Driscoll next.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, just a little bit of background. I'm hearing things today that have concerned me greatly about the mission of the commission. This commission was established for the purpose of taking these kinds of issues that are retirement related out of the hands of committees in the House and the Senate, where they may not have the expertise, the ability to dive in and to give the due diligence that's necessary on these topics. And today I'm hearing people say things like, when we pass it out of here, it has more committee stops. Senator Pappas and I have carried a number of omnibus bills from this commission, and we do not like to see things change as they go through the House and the Senate on these bills. We like to do the work in the commission. If we've missed something, we line up the amendments at the committee stops to keep them 100% in line, lock, step, and barrel, to make sure that we are presenting our colleagues, the 201 members of the legislature, with a product that the commission has looked at, has vetted, and has worked through. I'm very concerned that if we start part and parceling this through the legislative process, that we'll have amendments that will be going on in committees where people do not have the expertise. All 14 of us agreed that we would give up our Monday mornings to be here, to do this job. And the first real substantive piece that we have, we're passing it out in a process that isn't even under the mission of what we're looking at doing. And my hope and suggestion, Madam Chair, that we can lay this over, bring the information back so that the commission can hear this, so the commission can see what's going on. We're about to establish a large retirement program in the state of Minnesota. The commission will not have much input after it leaves this commission and goes through the committee process. So I'm asking again that we give some consideration to holding this over, or if it does need to go through the committee process, that this bill comes back to the commission so the commission can learn what's in there and what others have made decisions on that the commission did not have the opportunity to have input in because they are maybe not on those committees or in that legislative process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. I don't know, Senator Pappas, if you have a response, but I would just state that because there are other committees that have jurisdiction over pieces of this, we do want to make sure that those committees hear the bill. But I am not opposed to the bill coming back here for the commission to see it before we move it forward. So I appreciate your suggestion, Representative O'Driscoll. Our goal is always to ensure that our commission members know what is in our bills, and this is a very important bill. Senator Pappas, did you have anything else to add?
Madam Chair, that would be fine. I think that makes sense, but we should have the other committees also look at the bill and then have it come back here for a review. I don't know if it can officially come back here because of the way we're set up, but certainly we could unofficially review it.
And we can have that discussion, Representative O'Driscoll. Thank you. Senator Howe.
Well, thank you. And, I think it's important to understand that I understand there's got to be an initial investment. I'm just wondering how that investment gets paid back to the state as they did in Oregon, but that's a discussion we can continue to have. But I was interested, Senator Pappas, when you said that there's an opt-out provision. Can you, I've been looking at the bill, I cannot find the line where that is, and if you can show me, that's fine. If you can't, it's something that I think we need to really look at, because some folks have different investment options out there, and they should have the opportunity to opt out, especially if they're struggling to put food on the table, that type of thing. So if it's there, I appreciate that, but I cannot find it
Madam Chair, I
myself.
think Ms. Linczewski can probably find it quicker than I can.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Ms. Linczewski.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Pappas, Senator Howe. Over on line 4.5 of the bill, it states there that contributions must be made on an after-tax Roth basis unless the covered employee elects to contribute. Excuse me. Let's see, where is that? Oh, shoot.
Madam Chair, we don't need it to take up much time. I'm just saying that I don't know where it's at. If they can find it and show it to me, either that or, I think everyone would be interested in seeing the language, and they don't need to do it at this time. They can do it at a later time.
We will do that, Senator Howe. Thank you so much for that. We'll make sure to get that information
My
back to the whole committee. Is there any further discussion on the bill? If not, I'll just take a voice vote. I did not hear a call for a roll call vote, so those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, House File 782, the Senate File 413 as amended is recommended for passage within the corresponding House and Senate committees of jurisdiction. And Senator Pappas, I did not give you the last word. Did you want to have a last word? We did already vote on this, but
That's right, Madam Chair. I know our time is short, and I have another bill.
thank you so much. Then our next bill up is a Senator Pappas and Representative Nelson bill. It's increasing the employer contribution limit to the International Union of Operating Engineers Multi-Employer Pension Plan. If you are ready to present, please make your way to Senator
Thank you, Madam
Pappas,
Chair, and
present.
there should be someone here to come join me. Several people.
Okay.
I can make copies.
Madam Chair, what this does, it is Senate File 1393, House File 1201, increases the cap on the employer contribution to the International Union of Operating Engineers Pension Fund. Right now, Minnesota statute restricts the amount governmental subdivision employees may contribute to the supplemental pension fund. By law, public employee operating engineers currently contribute to the PERA plan and are allowed to contribute to the International Union Central Pension Plan. The bill allows the maximum amount contributed to be updated from $5,000 a year to $10,000 a year, and the change allows operating engineers employed by public sector entities to contribute more to their retirement plans if it is collectively bargained with their employers. This statutory set amount has not been adjusted in approximately 15 years. And I have two people
Madam Chair, we
joining
have
me
an
today, Mr. Chantry and Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Ben, I will make the motion to lay over the bill, House File 1201, Senate File 1393, so that the bill is moved. And we actually do, it looks like there is an amendment, a 1A amendment to the bill, Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, I'll move the A1 amendment, and that's, what that does, if you look on the bill, it allows the Laborers International, raises their max from 7,000 to 10,000.
Thank you, Senator.
In line with the operating engineers.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Any discussion to the 1A amendment? Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting the 1A amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed signify by saying nay. The motion prevails and the 1A amendment is adopted. We're back to the bill as amended, and then we can have our testifiers provide their testimony. So if you are ready, please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Chris Chantry. I'm the General Counsel for the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49. I am honored to be here today and thank you for the opportunity to testify on House File 1201 and Senate File 1393. I also want to thank Representative Nelson and Senator Pappas for authoring this legislation. Some background information on our union. Local 49 represents more than 14,500 operating engineers across Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Our members include heavy equipment operators and mechanics who work on both public and private construction sites, including roads and bridges, residential and commercial construction, as well as energy projects. Approximately 2,700 of Local 49's members are employed by Minnesota public sector entities such as public utilities, airports, counties, cities, townships, and school districts. By law, public employee operating engineers currently contribute to the Public Employees Retirement Association, PERA, pension plan, and are allowed to contribute to our International Union of Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund plan. However, Minnesota Statute 356.24 restricts the amount governmental subdivision employees may contribute to supplemental pension plans, such as the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund. The bill before you would allow the maximum amount contributed by these employees to the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund to be updated from $5,000 a year to $10,000 a year. Simply put, the change allows operating engineers employed in the public sector to engage in collective bargaining with their employers to increase contributions to their retirement plans, if agreement is reached with their employers. This update allows that negotiation, discussion, and consideration to take place. We have reached out to our partners on these matters and have had positive discussions. Also, thus far, PERA has not communicated any concerns with this legislation. For Commission members' awareness, the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund annual funding notice, which was provided to you, shows a funded percentage of 102.6%, showing that the fund is extremely healthy. I would also note that the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund was established in 1960 and is the second largest multi-employer defined benefit pension fund in the United States, with approximately 138 active and vested participants and 80,000 recipients. Local 49 currently represents approximately 1,423 public sector operating engineers that currently participate in the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund. The Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund is not new to public sector employees or employers, and many have participated in it for years. To be clear, we are not asking to increase the contribution limit because the Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund is insolvent or because the federal government is forcing us to. In fact, it is the opposite. Because of the health and vitality of the operating engineer's central pension fund, we are requesting to increase the contribution limit so that these employees can engage in good faith bargaining to be able to contribute more of their negotiated total package to the fund, ensuring that they and their families will see an increased pension benefit at retirement. It is my understanding that the statutorily set maximum amount of $5,000 for operating engineers has not been adjusted in approximately 17 years since 2006. As you are all well aware, the cost of living and cost of retirement has gone up in those 17 years and will only continue to rise. Ultimately, the union's goal for public sector operating engineers is for them to be able to retire with dignity, and be able to retire in a way that allows them to support themselves and their families. The Operating Engineers Central Pension Fund is a resource that allows these employees to do just that. That is why we are requesting to increase the contribution limit. Again, on behalf of the union and its membership, thank you for the opportunity to testify. With me today is Jonathan Turner, one of the union's business agents, who is also here to help answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Turner, do you have testimony as well? Okay.
Nope, Madam Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Are there any questions or comments? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Senator Pappas and Representative Nelson bringing this bill to the commission. I'm supportive of it because it is just allowing the labor unions here to negotiate and, provide more retirement benefits for their members. And additionally, both of the multi-employer pension plans that we're discussing, both for LIUNA and for the 49ers, are in a very strong funding position. And it's important, if they weren't in a strong funding position, that we could potentially be creating an unfunded liability for the employers, for the local units of government. And so I think this is a very reasonable request and has my support.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Any further comments or questions? Seeing no further discussion, the bill is laid over for future inclusion. And before we move on to our last piece, and thank you testifiers for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Pappas, actually, and I'm doing this all wrong in all different orders today because I'm trying to get us done in time, but did you have any closing comments before we, okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, it's fine.
And thank you testifiers for being here today. And Ms. Linczewski did find the spot in the previous bill, a secured choice, where there, so if you could share that information for us, Ms. Linczewski.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator House, sorry for the delay here, but if you look at line 4.19 of the bill, this directs the board to set contribution rates. And then it also states here, subject to the covered employee's election to change the contribution rate or cease contributions. And that isn't a requirement that the board allow for that.
Senator Howe.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think we probably need to, that's great if they want to cease contributions, but it doesn't say they can opt out from making any contributions. So somewhere they have to start. So I think we need to probably look at the bill and add something in there that an employee has the opportunity to be upfront and clear about that option. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Howe. Our final item of business is to consider a presentation providing an overview of the Minnesota State Individual Retirement Account Plan and its relationship to TRA. Welcome to the committee. Those who are here to testify today, I think I have two people here. Jonathan Bone and also Dick Kaspari. If you can make your way to testifier's table and identify yourself for the record and begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Derek Hughes. I'm the System Director for Total Rewards with Minnesota State. And I would like to just let you all know that we're very grateful for your time this morning, and I will speak very quickly here as we have a 10 o'clock deadline coming up here. Excuse me, I've prepared, coordinated our presentation and testimony with my colleague from one of our faculty unions, Dick Casper, who's here joining me as well. And we'll try and put all of this into one package for you so we can be the most respectful of your time. If you look in your slide deck with me, excuse me, on page 2, beginning on page 2, we list our retirement options within Minnesota State, and we have mandatory and voluntary plans available for our employees. The mandatory plans, shown green on the left, include defined benefit options and defined contribution options. Our classified employment fall in the defined benefit Minnesota State Retirement Systems defined benefit plan. The unclassified have a choice between the defined benefit plan, pension plan with the Teachers Retirement Association, or the defined contribution plan, the 401A IRAP account is what we refer to it as generally. Whether it is a teacher's retirement participant or an IRAP participant, both have the option to participate in the supplemental retirement plan, which is also defined in statute under 354C. The voluntary options include both the 457 plan managed by MSRS, the deferred compensation plan, and the 403B, which we have exclusive to Minnesota State. Both have the pre-tax and the Roth options for investments. If you'll go to the next slide with me, on slide 3, quick overview of our plan participation. With our current employees, our current employment on the left, you'll see our participation is almost evenly split, about a 51-49% and some change split. This has been true historically as well. And then on the right side, we break that 51 and 49% out, showing the number of employees that we have split over multiple defined benefit plans. Now, I'll quickly just note that we do have members in PERA, St. Paul TRFA, and MSRS, simply because they have come to us with legacy participation and been able to maintain that current coverage while under the employ of Minnesota State. That's why there's those additions there. Go to the next slide. Looking at our plan highlights, our record keeper is TIAA currently, and we've been renewed with them in a contract since July 1 of 2022. And our plans have active and inactive employees within them, 21,000 participants within the 3 different plans cumulatively. We have a $28 annual fee, and that is per participant, regardless of balance. And that is whether, that fee is assessed whether you're in the IRAP, the SRP, the supplemental, or the 403B, or any combination thereof. So it's just a flat fee assigned universally. We have $3.1 billion. It's between 3 and 3.5. It depends upon market fluctuation currently in assets under management. We, to speak to Senator Rasmussen's earlier comments with the new retirement program, we do have compliance built in with Aon as our 321 ERISA relationship for investment management and fiduciary compliance. And the system board of trustees ultimately has final authority over any fund decisions or lineup making decisions. I'll take you to the next slide. Looking at our contribution history, we began as a system in 1995 as MINSCU. Most people knew us as, and may still know us as. At that time, and even historically, dating back a few years, the contribution rates were 4.5% with the employee and 6% for the employer. In 2019, we came to you with a fix, if you will, to resolve the employer pickup contribution issues between the defined contribution and the defined benefit. That said, if you're giving an employee the opportunity to choose one plan or another, the IRS's stance is that the employee does not choose whether or not they get to defer more tax, provide more tax deferred income. The employer may do so. So those employee contributions needed to match. And at that point in time, if anyone had a remaining election to move, we moved it to 7.5% to match TRA. And anyone who no longer had opportunity under statute to move, we simply increased them over time, and we'll be at 7.75% in 2024, matching TRA. We are proposing an employer increase to 8.75% from the current 6%. And I'll ask my colleague, Dick Casper, if he'd like to speak to that.
And pardon me, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Dick Casper. I'm legal counsel for the Interfaculty Organization, the union that represents the state university faculty. that increase is to match the employer contribution to TRA. Though the number of folks in the DC plan throughout Minn-State is approximately half, the number of faculty at the university level is much higher than half at Minn-State. It's approaching 80%. It is the default option for folks, and a big difference between this group of employees and, for example, our K-12 teachers is that much fewer than half of them have tenure. Of course, we have many adjunct faculty part-time who have no route to tenure. We have many full-time fixed-term faculty who are on contracts for a year or two. And finally, we have a 5-year probation, even for folks who are on a tenure track. And for these folks lacking the job security that most state employees have, portability is critical. In addition, we have a tremendous number of folks who want to take the responsibility to manage their own retirement planning and savings. These folks, among our members in particular, are taking a substantial risk away from the state. They're taking the risk of investment upon themselves over time, and frankly, they are feeling at this point shortchanged by the fact that their colleagues receive a higher retirement contribution for not having taken that risk and passed it on to the Teachers Retirement Association. So this we see as a basic matter of equity for this part of our faculty and an important issue for you to address. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll move forward with me to slide 6, you heard Mr. Casper mention the default plan. And so the statute is written such that, and I broke it just into bite-sized pieces, so this next section really builds on each other. Please let me know if you have any questions as we go through this, because any misunderstanding of the previous parts can lead to greater confusion as we move along. If an employee has eligible service credit with a state of Minnesota defined benefit plan, it does not matter which of the 4 defined benefit plans that we have that do present before this commission. If they have any allowable service credit, their default investment as of July 1, 2011 is the TRA plan. And then if they have not worked for the state or they've never contributed to a defined benefit plan in the state, their default plan is the IRAP, the 354B defined contribution plan. Move into the next slide. We give people an election. And what this slide is simply showing is if you're in TRA as your default, you may elect IRAP. If you're in IRAP as your default, you may elect TRA. There are 2 elections. One is available to everybody, and the second is a smaller group. So the initial election is our 1-year opportunity from the date of eligibility that an employee may prospectively elect the opposite of their default. The second chance election is upon becoming tenured as a faculty member and within our system, whether it be at the 4-year, 2-year, or within our 4-year service faculty, they are given a second 1-year window to convert to TRA. And that's as if they go back and took TRA from day 1. IRAP never happened. And they go back and work, coordinate with TRA to repurchase that annuity and have that annuity going forward. We'll go to the next slide, slide 8, the election value add. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This was capturing some of the information my colleague, Mr. Casper, shared, but just again, capturing this mobility and portability has been a real value add for our participants who, let's say they find out teaching is not maybe their destined career for the rest of their life and so forth. From an employer perspective, though, I do want to point out that we do provide one-on-one certified financial advisor planning. We provide wealth management advisement at no cost to employees and participants, and we do provide a financial wellness platform that we're in the process of continuing to roll out, which includes public service loan forgiveness assistance, budgeting assistance, and just debt relief and management and counseling, helping people deal with some of that perceived shame of not understanding understanding how and why they may have found themselves in the debt that they're in. On the next slide, we get into this dilemma that we face, and this is around the election. So up to this point, everything seems like it's pretty transactional, moves very quickly and smoothly. In subdivision 4 of 354B.211, this is where that 1 year timeframe comes from, commencing the covered employment. And except as provided in subdivision 6, which is that second chance election, it is prohibited to move from one plan or the other in statute. And then an election made under this subdivision is then irrevocable if, whether it's made under the initial or the second chance election. That's what's tying our hands together. And I've given an example scenario here, and for the sake of time, I won't read it, but suffice it to say, it's a very practical example of what we run into. The employee wasn't informed or was not notified that they had this election. The 1 year window closes, and there is no longer an opportunity for us within the current statutes to allow this person or permit this person to transfer to TRA, nor for TRA to accept that movement. And that really is the definition of these next two slides of the issue we're trying to resolve. If we go to the next slide, I wrote at the top of my handwriting there, 10. Excuse me, we've taken this one solution, broken it into two parts. And both solutions will enable TRA and Minnesota State to coordinate this retirement account transfer without having to result in individual legislation coming before you. And you'll see me here again next week as part of those bills as well that are coming through this year. Let's go to for the sake of time, I had more information there, but let's go to slide 11. Excuse me, the next slide. This is the immediate initial solution, part 1. So effective with this legislation, taking effect, July 1, 2023, we're simply taking a look at what is, for parity, what is the process for omitting member deductions. We fail to actually make the contribution or take the deduction from the employee and make the contribution. Following that mindset, after an employee has reached the end of their 1 year window going forward from July 1, 2023, if it's less than 60 days, then we would give the employee a subsequent 90-day election period to either elect TRA prospectively or stay in IRAP. And that 90 days does have parity with other areas of the IRAP statute. And if it's greater than 60 days when we realize our error, then the employee is given the opportunity to do a full conversion, and upon surrendering their IRAP to TRA, Minnesota State will pay the difference. So this is I'll point out, this is a rather strict plan moving forward for Minnesota State, but we're prepared to recognize that accountability is trying to make sure these are getting correct as we move forward. The following page, page 12, excuse me, goes over the course of this next calendar year and into the next legislative session. We'd like to create a 9th subdivision, and that would be representing anybody who had a missed election prior to July 1 of 2023, historically. And we would, essentially what's listed here is following the language as it's listed in the individual legislation, as is written today. The reason we'd like to focus on moving this out is there are innumerable complexities that we've been uncovering with trying to determine who remains eligible and the impact upon Minnesota State and how we can best support them fiscally so that they can successfully transfer. That said, an employee may have had previous experience in a county. Let's say they worked for the county from 83 to 97, came to work from us from 97 to present. We don't know about their Rule of 90 eligibility with their prior service, and that changes the cost of the annuity significantly. We want to get this right. And the other piece that this would enable us to do is we are able to identify now the number of people that are missing elections. So in addition to a broadcast message, which is proposed in this language to be just an annual notification, so we're not missing these elections, people are aware on an annual basis. we would go to these individuals directly and say, we've made an error and here's how we can fix it. And this legislation is going into place that will provide us that opportunity to aid you with that. Without knowing some of that fiscal impact, and albeit I'm not an actuary, so I won't know the full fiscal impact, but I'm really just looking at it from big or small, very simple terms. Are we talking millions of dollars or thousands of dollars? It's been difficult for us to assess what's a manageable risk factor for us to assume as a system, rather than simply saying Minnesota State will pay the remainder of this balance, because it could be significantly budget impacting to some of our campuses. So that's why we've split it into two parts. And at this point, we're at 10:02, so I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes, for the presentation. And Mr. Casper, I know that I heard you do a testimony already, but did you have additional testimony? Because if not, we have someone else. We'd have to just ask anybody in the audience who wants to testify today to also speak. Did you get a chance to, I heard your testimony already. Did you have more testimony you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify as well? Thank you. If you could come and identify yourself and begin your testimony.
Morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Jay Stoffel, the Executive Director of the Teachers Retirement Association. And my only comment relates to some of the information. I've just seen this for the first time today, but we are eager to work with Minnesota State and the Pension Commission to develop any kind of new legislation and a new process for making these transfers happen. Our concern would be that when a transfer does occur from a person with an IRAP balance to the TRA, we charge what's called the actuarial present value of that service that they've earned so far to date. To give you a sense for what that might amount to, it's a range usually between $8,000 to around $11,000 per year of service that the person is purchasing. So that's the purchase amount that we would need when these transfers occur to keep the pension fund whole. If it's anything less than that, then that would mean that other TRA members, other TRA members would be subsidizing that cost for the member coming in from Minnesota State. So some of the things on the very last page of the presentation today, it talks about Minnesota, the very last bullet point refers to a penalty amount. I don't know if that's the actuarial present value. Again, we are eager to work with Minnesota State to get the language right, to make sure that the TRA fund is made whole in these transfers. And that's, otherwise, I think it's a good idea to get this in a bill that would improve the process.
Thank you, Mr. Stoffel. Is there any questions from our members? Senator Frentz.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I have a more basic question because, of course, this goes back to 2020. What are members telling you about the imbalance in contribution between the employee and the employer?
Senator Frentz, is that for a particular testifier?
Mr. Casper, I see you leaning forward and smiling.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. It's something I hear about on a regular basis, and people do not really cannot accept the proposition that because they took on the risk of providing for their own retirement, the employer is going to make a lesser contribution to that retirement income security. And frankly, I can't explain it to them except through the happen chance of legislative and IRS history here. Not a very satisfying answer. Referring people to IRS regulations is never a satisfying answer on a matter of equity.
Thank you, Mr. Casper. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kasperi. And I do just want to say really quickly before we wrap up today that we have been hearing about this issue with IRAP for a couple of years now, and I think that it's great to hear that we have continued will to work through this. And as such, I have asked the nonpartisan staff with LCPR to actually begin drafting legislation, because instead of fixing these as one-offs, we should have a general fix for something that is fixable. And so we will be working on that language and bringing it forward. So I suggest and I encourage you to work with our staff in order as that legislation is being drafted. Thank you so much for your testimony today. That does conclude our business for today, and our next commission hearing, it will be on Monday, February 27th. We will be hearing bills related to the Minnesota IRAP and hearing issues related to teachers' pension. Seeing there is no further business in front of this committee, this meeting is adjourned.